Today, an extraordinary look, rarely seen, at the moment when a Russian fighter jet collided with a U.S. drone. The U.S. military just put out this video today, and in this we'll show you, it goes out of communication a bit, but take a look at this still shot. You can see one of the things that the Pentagon has laid out, the Russian fighter jet just dumping, you see that dumping fuel at one shot, and then Russia has denied that that it collided with the drone. But in these side-by-side photos, you can see that the drone's propeller has been damaged. You can see through the video from the collision. You see right there. Let's get over to Oren Liebermann, who's live at the Pentagon, because not only is this video, the fact that we are seeing it, extraordinary, Oren, but you also are learning some more about what Russian leadership knew about this.
Absolutely. So first, let's take a look at the video to get a better sense of this. And there are two clips here of two different passes from those Russian fighter jets as they approach the U.S. MQ-9 Reaper drone. So here is the pass where they dump fuel as they get close. And in the first pass, the fighter jet doesn't hit the U.S. drone, and you can see the propeller still spinning there. The propeller is working fine. It is the second clip that makes it clearer what happened here and that the Russian denial simply doesn't hold water. That jet approaches again, a Russian Sukhoi Su-27 fighter jet, and as it passes, it once again dumps fuel. As it hits the drone, the video itself is disrupted a little bit. It essentially is pixelated and goes to bars for a moment. But when it comes back online, you can see the damaged propeller. A propeller obviously not supposed to look like that with a bent end. That's the telling signal, the telling clip of video where you see the collision between the Russian fighter jet, or the effects of the collision, I should say, between the Russian fighter jet and the drone itself. Now, for more context on this, we've learned from two U.S. officials familiar with the intelligence behind the matter that the instructions to harass the drone, essentially the orders to the Russian fighter pilots, came from some of the highest levels of the Russian Ministry of Defense to harass, disturb, disrupt in some way the operation of that U.S. surveillance drone. Those officials say it's not clear that it went higher than that. In other words, it's not clear that Russian President Vladimir Putin knew in advance this was going to happen. But it is telling that the officials are telling us that the highest levels of the Russian Ministry of Defense gave the orders to harass the U.S. drone over the Black Sea. The drone itself then went down, according to U.S. Air Force Europe, some 70 or 80 miles southwest of Crimea. Now, for the follow-on here, the video itself gives support to the U.S. side and the U.S. Position and essentially narrative of what happened here, and seriously undercuts the Russian claims that there had been no collision, which was what the U.S., or rather the Russian ambassador to the U.S. said after he was summoned to the State Department on the day this story came out. Kate, we will continue to follow this and, of course, to see this incredible video of how this all played out.
Absolutely. Great reporting, Oren. Thank you very much. For more on this, let me bring in retired Lieutenant General Ben Hodges. He's a former commander of U.S. Army forces in Europe. General, thanks for coming in. 19 passes made by the jets, going on for 30 to 40 minutes is what we're learning. What sticks out to you in this video?
Well, two things. First of all, this obviously was not an accident. This was a deliberate act, and I think Oren did a good job of sort of laying out the context for that. But what makes this important is not the loss of a drone, but this is what it means to defend the so-called international rules-based order. International airspace, freedom of navigation, claims to territorial waters, all of these things are being played out now because of Russia's illegal annexation of Crimea and their illegal war of aggression against Ukraine. So this is a symptom of this. And of course, the Chinese will watch to see how we respond to this as well because of their own illegal claims in the Pacific.
What do you think first of how the response we have heard from the Pentagon, from the Defense Secretary, from the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs, coming out very clearly and talking about this now a couple times?
Yeah, I've been impressed, actually. Secretary Austin, of course, conveying the seriousness of this, Chairman Milley, but also not overreacting. This is not the kind of thing where now we're going to go up and start kinetic engagements against Russian aircraft. Instead, what Secretary Austin said, all right, we're going to put another drone back up there. This is international airspace. We were doing everything according to law. And so this is how you protect and defend the use of international airspace, which affects all of us, not just there in and around Ukraine. it also is important, I think, to see the example of the United States with transparency, immediately releasing the video saying, this is what happened. And you and your team there have done a good job of making it clear what happened. You can be sure those 2 Russian aircraft have video capability. And if they were, in fact, not guilty of what it's clear that they've done, no doubt the Kremlin would have rolled out that video immediately to make their case. And we haven't seen any of that.
One question is always, with every move, is there a counter move from Russia? Do you think, though important for transparency, as you say, showing leadership and transparency on the part of the Pentagon, do you think Russia will interpret this and see a reason to further respond now that this video has been put out?
I think they will wait to see what we do next, obviously. I mean, this is the typical Kremlin playbook of deny everything, distort, distract, to try and change the narrative. And of course, if we don't respond by putting a drone up again, then this kind of gives weight to their claim that their airspace around Crimea is actually theirs. So we are correct, and the Secretary is correct to go back in and challenge that. But I think there's no need to overreact or go try to shoot something down. But we have to make sure we continue to uphold freedom of navigation and use of international airspace.
And as we see in the video, and as Oren laid out very well, the video very clearly undercuts Russia's denial, though a Russian strategy, as you point to, General, that the Russian jet, that the incident didn't happen, that the Russian jet didn't clip the drone. But what is still unclear is whether the Russian pilots intended to strike the drone. Does the answer to that question matter from your perspective? Well,
this reflects exactly what John Kirby said yesterday, that this is a reckless, unprofessional, and unsafe act by the Russian pilots. I have not been impressed over the past 14 months with the level of training and discipline of Russian pilots. It's one thing to take off and land and fly close to something. But I mean, when you talk about getting up next to another aircraft, getting as close as they did there, with turbulence, things that can happen, the chances of a mistake are very high. And I don't know that they intended to actually hit it. I'm sure that what they wanted to do was cause it to fail or to disrupt the operation by dumping fuel on it, which in itself, obviously that was a deliberate act. To actually hit it, of course, we don't know. But I mean, when you get that close, those are the kind of things that can happen. And again, this is the same military that is committing war crimes every day in Ukraine. And it reflects, I think, also a very brutal, ruthless sort of society there. So I'm not surprised that their pilots would be a reflection of that in terms of undiscipline.
Lieutenant General Ben Hodges, thank you very much.